Well, thank you for having me be here today. My name is Shawn Kelley, and I'll tell you a bit about myself in one slide here. We're going to shift gears slightly from the yes and very creative exercise to maybe something that's a little bit more analytical, but there's certainly creativity in the way that we make decisions too. And that's what the critical thinking class, well, the subject of critical thinking is about. This is a class that we teach at Medtronic. We've taught it for I think over 15 years to thousands of Medtronic's employees, and it's a class really. I think you'll find it a little bit unexpected. It's about how we make decisions, but it's about those hidden influences that affect how we make decisions. Maybe we're not aware of all the time, and we don't think about a lot, but are certainly an important part of what we do as humans and as individuals and as part of teams and how we go about our daily lives. All these things are present all the time, and I think it'll be interesting to kind of to show you to raise your awareness about this. Let's see. So a bit about me. I've been a Medtronic scientist for about 11 years. I've been in medical device my whole career. I've been part of FIRST for about the last 10 years. Daryl Unterrecher, who some of you may remember, is drafted me to be a judge, and I've also been now for the last few years the judge advisor for the North Star FRC competition. I'm passionate about this idea of critical thinking, and I think it can be useful not only in your first robotics career, in your professional career after high school, but also in your personal life. I think how we think and make decisions is an important part of what we do every day. And in the spirit of that, right, I want this to be a very interactive class, very much like the yes and exercise. Feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to respond in chat. I'm going to ask kind of a series of questions, and I think it'll be interesting for all of us to kind of see what the responses are. And we'll also have a series of exercises that I hope you'll find instructive. Really, we're a team here as we go through this critical thinking subject over the next hour or so, and we'll all get a lot more out of it if we kind of share our thoughts. So to kick things off, I want you to think back about today. What was the first decision that you remember making today? Right? Clearly, you're here, you're in the class, you're on a Zoom call. You made a lot of decisions to get here, but what is the first decision that you remember making? Get out of bed to get the phone, thank you. Snoozing your alarm. Was that a reflex or did you think about it? Coffee or tea? Yep. That's great, right? So way back to the beginning of your day. Pat, what you're gonna pack for lunch? Sleep again. How much? Lots about sleep. That's an important part of being a good critical thinker, being well rested, certainly. The point here is, right, is that as we move through life, and every day, we make hundreds, thousands of decisions, but how many of them are we really aware of? And if we had to take the time to think about all of them, how long would it take you to get through your day? How many of those decisions could you actually make? Right? As it turns out, we as humans make a lot of decisions automatically. And critical thinking is about being conscious of that decision-making process and how a decision gets made for those really important situations, right? Obviously can't be, we like to talk about this being thinking fast or slow, where the fast is that instinctive way that you move through life without thinking and on your automatic pilot. The slow thinking is where we have to stop and deliberate. And I think in the course of an FRC season, as you fundraise, as you build a robot, as you choose how to talk to judges, how you're going to compete, all of those things are probably important decision points that deserve more than automatic thought processes. And so we're going to talk today about, what we can do to be more aware of that decision-making process and kind of the factors we would like you to be aware of to be able to make more sound decisions, we'll call them, more of the time. So another question, respond in chat or verbally. What are decisions? What would you say a decision is? Weighing facts, that's good. Conscious choice. At the time that you make a decision, do you know that it's a good one? Do you know that you're going to like it?
Sometimes we have to make decisions that aren't always going to be like what we're going to like, but it's for the greater good.
Sure. That's excellent. We'll absolutely point that out, right? It's putting not putting your own interests at the center of the decision, right? But you know the outcome, right? Sometimes you know it right away, but sometimes you don't know it until much later, right? When you build your robot, do you know how good it's going to do in the game right away? Do you know how you will do in a competition as a result of all the decisions that you've made? Right, trading off is starting to get at the point I'm trying to make, right, is in critical thinking, we like to think about decisions as predictions. They're predictions about the future. When you make a decision, you're choosing a course of action that you think or your team thinks is going to be most beneficial. And maybe you get to know that right away, right? You order the pizza, you like it or you don't. You snooze the alarm, it feels good or it doesn't. But sometimes it takes a lot longer, right? And it's only in hindsight that we understand that those decisions were good. And I think for the really important decisions, that's like I'm looking at the comment in chat. Yep, right, exactly. You don't know how well your design is going to do, and right, and so there's a lot of these decision loops that go through an FRC season. Decide on a design, test it out. Is it good? Does it work? Do you need to change it? For those really important decisions, right, what you can control is not the outcome. It's the decision-making process. And that's the awareness that we want you guys to build. In critical thinking, in the class that we teach, we call it meta awareness, where it's not being just aware of the task that you're doing or the decision that you're making, but of the influences that are going on around that decision that are actually part of the decision that you end up making. As humans, we like to feel something about our decisions. Emotions end up being hugely important in our ability to think about a situation and to make a decision. So we've talked a little bit about critical thinking. We'll come to the definition that we like to use at Medtronic, but what does that mean to you? When we say critical thinking, what does that mean? So if you'd share in chat, that would be awesome. Take your best shot.
Some level of deliberation.
Absolutely. A level of deliberation, weighing the pros and cons. Yep. Evaluating.
Thinking a few steps into the future about how this might affect different paths that this action could cause you to take.
Yep. Thinking ahead. That's a great way to manage your decision-making process. Other thoughts? Yep, definitely thinking about the future. Right? Data, absolutely. Data, logic, not just emotion. Right? Emotions are important, but so are the facts, no question. Different perspectives. I like that one a lot. Absolutely. We're going to talk about that. Being able to walk around a decision and seeing it from different angles, from different perspectives, definitely. So here's the definition that we like to use at Medtronic. The set of skills and behaviors we need in order to make the best possible decision under a given set of circumstances, right? And there's a few really important parts of this definition, right? The skills and behaviors, that's what we're talking about today. The awareness, how you manage the decision-making process. But we know that every decision situation is going to be different, right? The best possible decision. We know we're going to have to make some choices and some compromises, right? That's the best possible decision under a given set of circumstances. Factors that weigh into that are that's facts and knowledge, the time you have to make the decision, the resources that you have, the team members that are involved in making that decision, and that what their knowledge and skills are, right? How you guys work together as a team. Do you know each other? Do you not know each other? Are you leveraging the diversity of thought and experience and viewpoints in a situation to make a decision, right? For those critical decisions, that's when we want to bring out our best critical thinking skills, right? With those situations that are really important, that are complex, that make us feel something, that give us the strong emotions, right? We can't do this all the time, but becoming good at recognizing those situations is a really important part of being a good critical thinker.
Shawn, Madison had her hand up earlier. Did you have a question, Madison, or was that
Oh,
just
I'm
left
sorry.
No, it's good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Madison. I didn't mean to miss you. All right. So here's a model that kind of is about, if you think about critical thinking, you think about thinking, you develop your meta awareness. This is kind of how we move through the subject, right? For those critical situations where we know we want to make a sound decision, right? Our awareness of the critical thinking space kind of starts with ourselves, right? And about how we as humans, how we've evolved to think, right? Then we call that human nature. And moving away from ourselves a little bit, it's how we view the world, right? And you'll see the icon we use for that is a pair of glasses. It's those rose-colored glasses that we all wear. And, we all might experience the same situation, but we're going to see it in a different way. And that's our personal frame of reference that we bring to a situation, a viewpoint, a perspective, right? Those are other words. And then there's what we'll talk a lot more about today, because FIRST is absolutely, FRC is definitely a team sport. How we work together in teams, right? We call that group dynamics. How do we communicate with each other? Do we listen? Are we arguing, right? Trying to come out with a consensus view of the best course of action, or are we fighting? Trying to win out, my idea is better than yours, right? We want to argue. It's great to argue and debate. We like that. That's a good critical thinking skill, but fighting is counterproductive. Trying to win out, right? Listening with the possibility of changing your mind is a big part of being a good critical thinker. And something we won't touch so much on today, but is also very important, is that culture aspect, right? It's not only when we form a diverse team that all of us come from different cultures possibly, but it's also that environment around the team. Is your school accepting of FIRST? How easy is it to fundraise? What is it well respected to be on the FIRST team, right? How the environment around the team definitely affects what goes on in the team. And more than that, even the team, as it works together, develops its own culture. Every team has a set of norms and behaviors that are accepted, and things that are, we just don't do things that way. That's the culture that you develop as a team, right? But we're going to probably focus more on group dynamics, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But most of all, what I want to convince you of is that there are all these factors, hidden influences, that affect how we think, and we can break them down into these different categories. And as we kind of as we move away from ourselves, they really start interacting with each other. And we break them up this way because we have to teach it. But you'll find, I think, if you study this more, that all of these subjects start to interact with each other. And so back to decision making, and we'll come back to this kind of decision making model. I want you to think about how things operate on your FRC team. How does your team make decisions? those important decisions. So in chat, it would be great to kind of hear a blurb or a verbal explanation. You know, what do you guys do to try to control that decision-making process?
We hear from everybody else's view and before we come out with our outcome.
That's awesome. Multiple people, definitely.
Our team, we speak through our ideas and explain why our ideas would work and stuff like that.
Why is, I think, very important, right? Explaining your thought process, definitely. Voting, that's a way to do it, absolutely. Is everyone's vote equal? Decision matrix, we've heard that before, and I think that's a good way to do it, right? You're being very conscious and you have a process that you move through. So, right, what we would not advocate for is making decisions by chance, right? That we want to consciously control the decision-making process for those important decisions if we can, as much as we can. And doing it by chance is probably not the best thing to do, right? But similarly, right, if we're very worried about making bad decisions and we get stuck in analysis paralysis and we can't ever move forward, right? And maybe we're afraid of taking risk. That doesn't work either, because we never make decisions and we never move forward, right? And I think that's another important concept about making good decisions and managing that process, is talking about risk, right? What might not work? Let's not just talk about the benefits of an option. Let's talk about why it might not work, and right, have that be a sharing process. And that's very akin to the yes and exercise that you guys went through, because it's sort of like telling stories. It's sharing your thought process, what you see might happen in the future, and letting other people do the same thing, so that you can ultimately understand those different viewpoints. And it will probably be that one of those ways to look at a situation ends up being most relevant given a certain situation, right? And it's the fact that you've gone through that process of sharing your options and your thought processes that allows you to better manage that decision-making process and have better outcomes more of the time, right? Because after all, we're going to have to take some risks to build a robot. We have to take risks in a career. We have to take risks as Medtronic to build products that help our patients, right? Taking risks is part of life. We just don't want to take those giant risks that end up, causing the robot, us not to be able to field a robot at the end of the day, that cause us to make a defect in a medical product that ends up hurting someone, right? Those are the things we absolutely want to avoid. And part of making those decisions as a human is wanting to have some frame of reference for comparison. And in simple situations, right, we call this kind of the seesaw exercise, and we'll go through just a few of these examples. It's not, the name there has a lot of significance, right? Making a good decision is like a balance beam, is like a seesaw, is a process of balancing the risks against the benefits, right? So it's like a seesaw in that way. But the saw part of the word, right, that what have I seen in the past, really colors what you're going to do in the future, right? If you've worked on a robot in the past and certain things have worked and haven't worked, you probably carry those viewpoints with you as you move into a new season. And we all know the game changes every year. So things that were a bad idea in past years might be good ideas this year. But if we keep that fixed mindset and don't allow ourselves to change our minds, that is probably not managing the decision-making process in the best way, right? And so the apples to apples comparison, right? We've all heard that. That's easy. When a situation is familiar and we can make a comparison back to a past experience, let's say, and it's completely relevant to the problem we're trying to solve now, easy. We can manage that, right? We can kind of have a good idea about what to do. But when the situation is a bit more complex, apples to oranges, right? You've heard that before too, where your past experience might not be as relevant as you might believe it is, right? And maybe you're aware of that, maybe you're not. It gets harder, right? And so as the situation becomes more complex, as your time gets shorter, as the amount that you have to do gets larger, as your resources are limited in terms of what you can do, things get harder. And on the next slide, I think this is more what real life feels like. So in chat, what do you see in this picture? Is there anything wrong with this? What do you see that might surprise you or confuse you? Gravity is broken. Love it. Yeah, unrealistic. Why? What's wrong with the picture? Right,
So
levers?
the lighter, the little kid is
Yep.
is apparently heavier than the big man.
And she's sitting closer to the pivot point too. Yeah, right. So life sometimes doesn't make sense. Situations don't make sense. The robot keeps breaking and you don't know why. Bricks, perhaps. And I think this is more like real life where we're faced with a complex situation. It's confusing. We don't know what part of the data we need to use to make our decision. We're feeling conflicted, right? We're feeling confused. We call that cognitive dissonance, right? It's that uneasy feeling that you get when you don't know what to do before you can make a decision, right? And as humans, we want to stop feeling bad as quickly as we can and get back to operating on automatic pilot, right? As humans, we really like to do that. Our brains, consume a huge amount, a fraction of the energy that we consume every day. And evolutionarily, that is a really good strategy is, run on automatic pilot as much as you can and save your energy for those hard situations where you really have to think about them. And the danger there is that you operate on automatic pilot all the time and don't switch into the the slower mode of thinking when you need to, right? And so we need to be aware, as I've said before, of recognizing the situations, when we need to use our good critical thinking skills. Right, and so let's spend a little bit of time thinking about what a sound decision is, right? And we've covered a lot of this already, so I'll just hit some of the high points, right? It's not determined by the outcome because decisions are predictions. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can control the process more than we can control the outcome, right? And what we have to trust in there is that if we do a good job controlling the process, leverage the strengths of your team, your diverse viewpoints, your diverse knowledge, your diverse experience, that you will make decisions that yield those better outcomes. But what we can really control is the process, right? And the parts of making that sound decision, of managing the process, using data and logic, talking about risk, and right, so what someone mentioned before, I don't remember who it was, but absolutely putting you may have to put your own interests aside to make the best decision that you can, right? It might not be your idea that's the best. It might be someone else's. The way that you wanted to fundraise, the way that you wanted to plan an event, right? Maybe someone else has a better idea. And we need to think about the situation that we're in and decide where we need to put our emphasis. And it might not be on your viewpoint. And so you have to recognize that. Right. And the other thing I would say, and we say this at Medtronic, and it's very much in the vein of FIRST, is we trust that everyone has the best intentions. So especially in a team situation when there starts to be conflict, right, and we're having strong emotions and we're trying to make a decision and we're butting heads, that's a really good indication that it's time to break out our critical thinking skills, right? Because everyone's trying to be successful. We have to trust in that. And it's some misunderstanding that is causing us to maybe fight more than we're arguing. And it's time to start, what we would say, it's time to start asking questions. Because that's a a great way to practice critical thinking. If you ask questions and really care about hearing the answer, you can resolve conflicts in a way that doesn't offend the person that you're asking questions to and informs you about their viewpoint. And so the best way, one of the best ways to practice critical thinking is by asking really good questions. And this is kind of that decision space of critical thinking, and another way to recognize when you should be practicing critical thinking skills, right? And so we've drawn a normal distribution there centered on the middle column. In the rows, we have the situations, kind of a general decision-making process, and the possible sources of error, right? And critical thinking can always be useful if you have time to use it. On the left-hand side, right, we just have situations that are determined by luck. Will our lottery ticket win? Will my trip to the casino be profitable, right? That's kind of, it's up to luck. And maybe talking about decision making ahead of time can help you a little bit, but probably not so much. On the other side of things, on the far right hand side, it's all about facts, right? It's that physics problem. You're trying to get the robot that can apply a certain force on its arm to throw an object of a known weight. You can make that calculation, and you probably don't need to do a lot of talking about it, right? Just let the physics speak for itself. In the middle is where we're really susceptible to errors in thinking and errors in decision. It's when we have to use judgment. We have some facts, but not everything that we think we might need. We have time, but it's limited. We have resources, they're also limited, and we're going to have to use our best judgment to make a decision. Those are the situations, especially when they're important ones, that we need to use our critical thinking skills. So what I want going to shift gears a little bit now. That was a lot of tell slides. I want to give you a chance to experience kind of what these hidden influences might be like. And so we're going to go through 4 examples. And I'll give you some instructions before we hit each example, but these are very interactive. I want you to help me think about each situation if you can. So first exercise. How many shades of gray do you see on the inset gray bar in the middle? In chat or verbally, either way. One, boy. 3, 2. Right, maybe you've seen the example before. Many, I like that answer better. At least that matches what my eyes see. Right, I think we see, even if consciously you know the answer, maybe you've seen this trick before, I think we see many shades of gray. Right, but there's the truth of it. That was 1 shade of gray on that bar. Interesting, I hadn't tried that. Focusing side to side. That's good, right? You're just controlling your decision-making process there and being able to master your visual cortex and do a good job seeing just 1 shade of gray, right? But the interesting thing is, if we return to the original scene, the illusion comes back, right? And it's almost like our eyes didn't learn anything, that we didn't learn anything. And I think this is a interesting example and there's other optical illusions I think that prove the same point. We've evolved as humans to our visual acuity, right? What do we spend the most hours of every day doing? We use our eyes a whole lot, and yet with all the evolutionary effort and the time that we spend doing it, our practice at using our eyes, we can still be fooled by relatively simple optical illusions. And what does that, if we can get fooled in that way, how many other times are we getting fooled when we're making decisions where we think we're controlling the process, but maybe we're not, right? And that's the point, that if our brains can fool us, there are lots of, in these optical illusions, there are lots of other opportunities for this to happen as well. All right, so another example. There'll be a set of instructions at the top of the screen. I want you to read what you see, right? I'll throw it up here in a minute, you know, silently in your head. All right, we'll try another example. So if someone would be willing to share, what happened?
There's letters missing.
Yep. And so what did you do when you saw that?
I
You still speed read it the same way.
So what do they say? If someone tell me what they say.
Can you read this? What are you reading?
Yeah. Wow. Right? You didn't make the sounds. You didn't go ka, you know, you filled in the letters, right? You automatically did that. You've been taught to read, right? You guys being on FIRST are obviously a bunch of smart people, right? The people that Medtronic hires are similarly intelligent people, and we all do the same thing. We've been trained very well to read. We read from left to right. We've read, these are simple words. We've all seen them before. It's a snap for us to fill in the blanks, right? But maybe there are other letters that could go in those spots and the words would be different and we would be wrong. The thing that we thought the word said would not be true, right? And that's the danger of running on automatic pilot, is that when we do that too much, especially in situations where our automatic pilot isn't giving us the right answer, we risk making mistakes, right? And if those are important situations, we risk making important mistakes that will have consequences for us later, right? And so here's another instance of automatic pilot, uh, you know, getting in the way of our automatic thinking. Bad stereotypes. Can you expand what you mean by that, Lisa? Exactly. Yep, what you expect to see. That's a really, really good point, right? And so if we think about bias, if we think about stereotypes, why do we do those things, right? Why is it cognitive biases, these automatic patterns of thinking or our automatic ways of seeing the world? Why do we do those? It's because they've been useful in the past, and we think they'll be useful in the future, right? And that's what you really have to be aware of to catch yourself doing those things, right? And it's the awareness. And so a catchphrase from the critical thinking class, if you were to remember one of them, it's without awareness, there is no choice. If we're aware of these automatic tendencies, right? And I don't want you to go away from this thinking that they're bad and I have to avoid automatic stuff. It's not good or bad. They just are. Sometimes they're incredibly useful. The point here is that we have to be aware of them if we want to compensate for them and choose to do something different. And so it's that building that dual awareness that I'm focusing on a task, but I'm also aware that I might be biased in my thinking. And I'm aware that maybe my team isn't working well together and I might have to change my behavior to help the team work better, right? It might not be natural for me to modify my behavior, but maybe that's the best thing to do for the team, right? It's only through having that awareness that we can make those different decisions that will give us those different and arguably better outcomes in the future. All right, and we'll go through another example. All right, so I'm going to throw up a pattern, a short paragraph of text, and I'll ask you to read it, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions. right, and here comes the question. And even before the question, I'm going to, in the spirit of critical thinking, I'm going to ask you a question about the question. I would like you to answer in the chat, is this a question about a fact or an opinion? Fact or opinion?
Opinion.
Okay. Other opposing viewpoints? Any facts? Got a fact? Okay, and so now we'll switch to the answer. Which is more likely, A or B?
B.
I heard a B. We have a few A's. So what is going on here when we ask this question? Why do we do this? Why is this important at all? Equally likely? So as humans, we love stories. We really like stories. And the yes and exercise point, point as an example. When we're faced, right? So if we think about life as a story and a complex situation, we like to take everything, all the information that we're given, we like to take that into account when we decide what to do, when we answer a question, right? It turns out that this is a question about I'll call it set theory, and maybe that won't mean everything, something to everyone, right? But it's always more likely if we have two groups that a person is a member of one group than that they're a member of both groups, right? Because there's a small overlap that's smaller than the size of either group when someone is two things rather than one. So it turns out that this is a fact-based question. Right? I was asking you for a fact, and if you know set theory, A is the answer, you're done. You didn't need any of the story. I didn't need to tell you anything, and you know the answer to this question. Right? Another thing that goes on here, right? That's the question that I think a lot of us were thinking about. Is it possible? Is it likely? Given the story, that seems like a very reasonable thing to do, right? And maybe you've caught yourself doing this in a complex situation. When we're faced with a question that's hard, that makes us uncertain, that makes us think, and we don't know what to do, we do something that's called substitution. We answer an easier question instead. And we might not even realize that we did it. You see, politicians do this all the time. You ask them a hard question, they don't answer your question, they answer the one they wanted to give you the answer to. Right? And so that's the thing to become aware of, that when a question makes us, or a situation makes us uneasy, again, that's a time to break out your critical thinking skills, to slow down, to think about the question more deeply, to consider carefully, to ask other people, right? Because you don't have to always know the answer. If someone on your team knows the answer, they can teach everyone else what the answer to that question is, share a skill, share their knowledge. Right? We don't all have to know everything. If someone on our team knows a piece of the puzzle, we can leverage that and be more effective as a team together than we are apart, right? That's another thing we like to say in critical thinking. We is smarter than me. And that goes to being a good team member wherever you are on that team. All right, and we have one more example. So I'm going to, again, lots of questions in our time together today. I'm going to put a question up on the screen, and I want you to just think about the answer, right? If you know it, don't shout out the answer. So hopefully you guys can read that. Hong Kong Elementary School, first grade admissions test question. right? And so as soon as your team knows the answer, just don't tell me the answer in chat. Raise your hand on the screen or throw it up. Just say yes, I know the answer in chat. When we teach this to a room full of people, what we have them do is raise their hands when they know the answer. Great. Some people know the answer, right? And how does that make you feel? This goes to not all of us have to know the answer if one of us does, right? If you don't know the answer and everyone else appears to know the answer, how does that make you feel? Right? It can demoralize you. It can make you feel like maybe you're not the FRC team member you thought you were, right? But if we share our knowledge, we can overcome those things, right? And make it more about teaching others than it is about knowing the answer, right? And so before I have you give me the answer in chat, I'm going to do something. I'm going to show you something else on the screen. I've done a frame shift here, right? We've walked around the problem and we've seen it from a different angle. So give me the answer in chat. What's the answer? 87. I'll tell you what I did when I saw this question for the first time. I tried to come up with the silly equation that would tell me what the answer in that spot was, right? But I wasn't taking into account all the information that I was given. This is an elementary school question. Elementary kids don't know how to compose equations, not most of them, maybe some of them, but not all of them, certainly. Right? And answering this question is about walking around the situation and seeing it from the viewpoint of the car that's parking, right? They would see the numbers in sequential order and know that they were parking in spot 87. But when this question is given to you as an outside observer, it's not that easy. And it's a little bit sneaky, in my opinion, in that all those numbers can be reversed and they still are a number, right? And so there's an interesting story about this question that goes to the founders of this class. One of them was a very, very much an engineer. That's Daryl. And one of them was the leader of the Knowledge Center, Richard Gillen, and he was a psychologist. And when Daryl found this question, he thought it was great because it was all about seeing things from a different angle. And he just shot it over to Richard Gillen, who saw the answer immediately right away because he was very, very good at rotating his frame of reference, at seeing things from different angles. Right. And so this goes to the point of, being able to see things from multiple angles can make problems easy. And I think we've probably all had that experience, even in an FRC build season where something is initially really hard. And after we solve it, we're like, well, why was that so hard? Why? It was because maybe it was because you didn't look at the situation the right way in the beginning, right? And so I would argue, leverage the diversity of your team and share your different viewpoints and listen to what other people are saying. And, we can overcome these confusing situations more quickly, is what I would say is a good way to manage that decision-making process. So hopefully I've convinced you that there are hidden things going on, that when you are viewing the world, you might not be seeing the complete picture, right? And so as we move through the world and make our decisions, these are some common reasons that we think people don't always make the best decisions. The genesis for this critical thinking class, where it came from, is that Richard and Daryl were asked to put together a class that would teach people about things that would help them prevent problems, rather than having to spend so much time and energy to fix those problems after they'd already happened, right? And these are the things that we think you can manage to make sound decisions more often, right? Recognize that these hidden influences that we've talked about today really exist, right? Talk about the risks involved with various courses of action, not just their benefits, but the way that they might go bad down the line, right? And that can help us maybe choose the course of action that has the most benefit with the least amount of risk, right? And recognizing that we're going to have to take some risk. and putting our individual viewpoints not at the center of the decision if that's required, right? So not optimizing at the right level. That would be, it's my idea, I have to have it, and I'm not going to be happy or part of the team unless we do things my way, right? That's not part of critical thinking. And so we'll come back to the critical thinking the decision-making model, how we want you guys to think about every situation. You come those important ones. You consider these hidden influences, and we'll talk just a bit more about group dynamics. Right, and so these are some of the things that we think are important as we work on a team, right? We talked about some of these, the norms that limit what we can and can't do, that if we don't agree, we might not be part of the team anymore, right? That pressure to conform, right? Which leads to groupthink, which leads to us not leveraging the power of the diverse viewpoints on our team. You know, you agree or you're not a member. We've said that before. You know, and the other thing I would say is authority, right? Mentors can have authority. They should be allow the team to make their own decisions, right? And so what the team does when the mentor is in the room versus not in the room, is that different? I would ask you to consider that. And if you are a leader, right, a design team leader, a safety team leader, you have a special responsibility on your team. And you probably have a large influence on the decisions that your team makes. And we see that at Medtronic all the time. When the boss is in the room and an issue gets discussed, different things get said than when that person is not in the room. And you know, when the boss is there, they probably have a special responsibility, say, not to speak first, to listen more than they speak, to weigh what the other people have said, and then to offer their opinion. So as a leader, you have a special responsibility. And the other thing that we think is largely in play in group situations is the power of the default position. And that is, if we're on a course of action, we're doing things one way, it's not working, we might discuss making a change, but the easiest thing to do is to just keep doing what we're doing. That's the default position, right? And that's, again, part of consciously managing the decision-making process. It's okay if we decide to keep doing what we're doing, as long as we've considered that seriously and discussed it, right? That might be the right thing to do, but it's also recognize also that it's the easiest thing to do. It will be harder to make a change. It's always harder to change. And even if that's the right thing to do, it's going to feel harder than just continuing to do what we've always been doing. So, you know, these are to get around these things, right? To be aware of them, to compensate for them. Here's what we would recommend, right? Use the power of your team. You're going to be a diverse team. And we would also say create a level playing field where everyone can contribute. And sometimes that means that we have to help those quiet voices get heard. We have to ask questions of people who explicitly who don't speak up a lot, right? Because they may have a really important idea that can solve a problem, and we just haven't heard from them. And as members of that team, right, we have to be courageous enough to speak up when we have an idea that we think everyone needs to hear. And that might not be easy at the time. It might go against the current prevailing opinion, and it's going to take some courage, and it's going to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but know that that's just part of the process, and that everybody who does this feels that discomfort. Tips for helping the quiet voices get heard. I think being very intentional is the way to do that. Not to put someone on the spot necessarily, though that's one way to do it, right? If they just don't speak up, if you ask them questions directly, if they will respond, that's one way to do it. Getting their viewpoint one-on-one can be another way to do it, right? That you don't make decisions right away, that you, in a smaller setting, that person may be more willing to speak up. So one-on-one, you can get their input and bring it back to the team, right? It's a difficult thing to do, right? And so and to the quiet voices, I would also say, have courage, right? To know that we were all at one point uncomfortable about speaking up, and probably every day at some point still are, but that's just part of the process. And so we can feel some confidence in that it's not just you who feels uncomfortable speaking up, almost everyone does. right? And similarly, in the critical thinking decision-making model, we have other recommendations for the other parts of the process too, the human nature and the frames of reference and culture. And so we can definitely, if there's interest, we can provide you a copy of how we think about critical thinking and about some of the modifications that we make in our own behavior and in our own awareness to try to make better decisions more of the time. So I'd leave you with a final question in the spirit of critical thinking, right? How will your team make better decisions? Hopefully some of what we've talked about here today, you will find helpful. And with that, I would open it up for questions and discussion. That's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. This subject goes much deeper than what we've touched on, and we can certainly provide, here are some really great books, if you're so inclined, that really have been foundational to the way that we think about critical thinking, and would be happy to take any questions. Very welcome.
This was really great, Shawn. Really appreciate your sharing your expertise. I've seen this numerous times, and every time I learn something new and different, and it makes me think in new ways. So really appreciate your joining us and being part of this today.
No, very welcome. Yeah, and right, I don't think that any of us are experts. We're all practicing our critical thinking,
yeah.
right? So we can all get better.
I just wanted to say, thanks for customizing it for us. I know you know a lot about the program, but I think, putting in the context of the decisions that teams have to make in the upcoming season makes it very relevant to what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's and I think Shar said this in her intro, but the experience that you guys get as being part of an FRC team is, I'll reinforce it again. I know I'm not the only one, but it really does mirror what goes on in careers afterwards and at Medtronic. And so the experience that you're getting working together, all the different aspects of running an FRC team are hugely relevant.
What do you think is the most important factor of all decision making?
I think I would answer with awareness, right? Being able to both look at how you are thinking about a situation as well as thinking about the situation, and you don't do them at the same time. You kind of step back and think about the situation, and then you go back to doing the task. But if you can have that kind of dual level of awareness, I think you can be really effective as a critical thinker.
Thank you.
It's being able to step outside your own shoes, right? We've all heard that before. That's awareness.
Okay, as we wrap up, this was a great session. I just really, really appreciate the engagement. Great questions came in. I hope you had fun. I know our teams here at Medtronic had fun working with you and putting this together. The improv can be a little bit scary and risky at first, but once you get rolling with it, boy, can it get fun. And I think that is also a testament to kind of the notion of engineering and the work that is done on FIRST, and like I say, some of the teams that we have here at Medtronic. That's the improv is where you get to the innovative ideas and work through that. And then of course, Shawn, your expertise and the work with critical thinking is equally as important. Because those innovative ideas need to be funneled down into real tangible solutions. And the critical thinking piece allows for that to happen as well. So hopefully you had fun, and hopefully you met somebody new and built some relationships along the way, or learned also how to, some skills or tips to engaging the next time you work within your own teams at your schools or wherever, however you're connecting.